And I thought to myself, yes, these women totally get it. This is what podcasting can be all about. An extension of your creative expression in art to be able to reach new audiences and build community around that creative spark. An invitation for others to come over and play with you. You're listening to The Creative Impostor, episode number 42. Welcome to The Creative Impostor. I'm Andrea Klunder, and right now we are riding a wave between two themes here on The Creative Impostor and in the Creative Impostor Facebook group and in the Chicago Women's Creative Collective, which are self-promotion. That's the theme of our upcoming Creative Collective brunch in Chicago, and play, which is the theme that will be coming up next. And here on the podcast, the last episode was an interview with Bree Noble, and we talked about being a career musician and finding creative, unexpected ways to successfully promote the work that you're doing with confidence. And right now, I'm working on editing an interview with Ruth Humphreys, who is an inner child coach and storyteller, which will be coming out next week. And we talked a lot about the importance of play. So here we have these two seemingly conflicting themes. Self-promotion, which sounds serious and like work and blech and boring. And then there's play, which sounds like fun and light and wee. And both are really key and important to keep us going, to keep our creativity sustainable. So let's talk a little bit about it. There was a time when playfulness and fun were not high on my values list. This was very recently. I thought, I have so much work to do. I have financial struggles. I'm trying to figure out who I am as an entrepreneur. I don't have time for play. And in fact, throughout history, throughout my 38 years on this earth, I have a tendency to turn play and fun and things that I love into work and seriousness. For example, my mom loves to tell a story of how in the neighborhood when I was a kid, the other kids on the block would get frustrated because rather than just riding bikes together, I always wanted to create some structure and do things like make them play traffic cop. Or one of my favorite things to play was school, even when we weren't in school. And then even when I went to college, it didn't go away because I went to study vocal music performance, and singing was something that I had a strong passion for, that I had always loved doing. And then I turned it into my major and it became work, and I kind of started to hate it. Even now as an adult, and even now with this self-awareness, I have a tendency to work a lot and to take on more professional projects than what any human is capable of completing. And I'm even in a relationship with someone who also loves to work all the time. Like me, he's an artist, but there's a very blurry line between making art and working when your art is your life and your passion is your art, and your art becomes your business and your business is work. It's a tricky cycle, and it can turn into a spiraling whirlpool of despair very quickly. So when you think about promotion and self-promotion, it can easily become another dreadful to-do on the list, a necessary evil, some would say. But fortunately for me, I have a lot of inspiring forces in my community and in my life right now calling me to play. Recently, I joined Charlotte Alea's Sacred Sojourner Circle, which is a program using tarot cards, helping nurture ourselves and our processes through creativity. Charlotte started the circle off with connecting to our two primary guides for the month, which are the Queen of Coins or Pentacles and the Queen of Wands. And both of these queens are calling us to nurture our creativity in different ways. So the Queen of Coins is very sensual. She represents earth energy. And so the inquiry question with our tarot pull for the Queen of Coins was, what can I do to nurture my creativity through the senses, through a sensual activity, like working with your hands, or in my case, it was movement that came up. And with the Queen of Wands, who represents the fire element, this is the creativity of spontaneity, of not planning too much, of connecting with that spark of something that can come seemingly out of thin air. And so that inquiry was, how can we bring more spontaneity into our process? When I posted on these prompts, Charlotte said, for some reason, a yoga retreat is coming up in my mind for you. And it was perfect timing because one of my creative yoga and music teachers, Sean Johnson from New Orleans, was actually visiting Chicago that very weekend. And I was signed up to take a Bhakti yoga class, which is a class in which we combine chanting and singing mantras and music with a strong yoga flow practice. And one thing that Sean is masterful at is weaving in elements of storytelling and connecting our creative purpose to that story. The following night was a concert with Sean Johnson and the Wild Lotus Band, which further cemented that movement, that energy, that spark, and connection to story, connection to myth even. And he likes to quote, I think it's Douglas Brooks, who is a Sanskrit scholar, that a myth is an outright lie told in service of a greater truth. And so we were exploring that concept together. And I just felt moving my body in that intense way, more intense than the yoga practice I typically do on my own. I'm kind of a lazy yogi as far as yoga practices go. But moving my body in that way and feeling some soreness in my leg muscles and my hips, and then having that energy of the mantras, the vibration of the music, of singing, of moving that through the body with a deeper breath awareness was really revitalizing and refreshing for me to move some energy that has recently felt stagnant. So I did get my mini yoga retreat, Charlotte. Thank you. Also, I'm currently in the process of editing my interview with Ruth Humphreys, who, as I mentioned, is an inner child coach and also a storyteller for children and grown-ups. And we talk a lot in the interview about recalling what it is that you loved to do as a child, or what you were curious about, the activities and explorations that would be so absorbing that it was almost as if time stood still. And so this weekend, I had an opportunity to shake it up with my also tendency toward workaholic partner, in that I needed to go to the suburbs for a music rehearsal for the Kirtan mantra band that I'm in. And again, chanting with the band, with the Bhakti Caravan, is something that I started doing for play. I started doing for fun. I started doing because it's my passion to sing these mantras and spend time with and perform with other musicians. And we're currently preparing our set list to perform at Milwaukee Kirtan Fest this summer. And it's kind of a big gig for us. And so even rehearsals for this thing that I love to do, that is so connected to my passion, has started to feel like work. And I was like, oh, I have to go to the suburbs to rehearse. And I was kind of dragging my feet a little bit. And my partner suggested, hey, is there any nature out there? So one thing you need to know about him is that he is a filmmaker. And he happened to have a very fancy, expensive digital film camera that he was using for the weekend for another project. But on that particular day, he had nothing scheduled. And this camera was like burning a hole in his pocket, that he really wanted to do something creative with it. And so he said, is there any nature or interesting locations around where you're going for this rehearsal? And I'm like, well, yeah, there's a huge forest preserve. So we looked it up and got some information, and it was like minutes away from where I was rehearsing. And we spent a good chunk of the day in the forest preserve experimenting with filming slow motion silent video in different settings and he filmed me meditating and wearing my podcasting headphones and also doing like tarot card spreads. And at first, when he suggested it, I was like, oh, I have so much work to do this weekend. I don't have time to screw around in the forest preserve shooting slow motion video. For what purpose? I have no idea. Like, sounds really cool. I wish I had time, but I have to do this, and this. Fortunately, he strong-armed me into doing it. And my better sense coming from the Queen of Wands and the Queen of Pentacles was like, be spontaneous, do this thing. You can create something and experiment with something without knowing exactly what you're going to use it for. And the result is really quite wonderful. And I still don't 100% know what I'm going to do with that footage, but it's really, really cool. So I'm sure you'll be seeing it soon. Then last night, more work. I was teaching a podcast envy workshop, which is a workshop that is an introductory level to what it takes to create your own podcast. And I was super inspired by the women who showed up for this particular workshop, because a lot of times people want to learn about podcasting and their primary questions are, what microphones do I need to use? How do I make money with a podcast? And how can I use a podcast to market my business? Which are all perfectly valid questions. But those are maybe not the best questions to start out with. First of all, a lot of that information you can just Google. You don't need to take a workshop with me to find out. Secondly, I don't really make money with my podcast consistently as of yet, so I'm not the best person to ask about that. And thirdly, it's just a little bit dry and boring to think about those things. So these women showed up and they had ideas about experimenting with formats. One woman is an actor, and she's been working on creating a one-woman show based around certain experiences in her life, and is thinking about, rather than mounting a one-woman show, or maybe before mounting it, launching a podcast around these stories and building an audience around them and seeing where it goes from there. And so it's totally just a passion project of creativity and self-expression. And then two women were working together on a story that, again, is based in real life, but they've been experimenting or dabbling in, should this be a documentary film, a web series, video, audio? How can we best tell this story? Or is there a way to tell this story through multiple formats? And so they're just kind of dabbling in different media formats and searching for the format that will best tell their story and really take what is a nonfiction, true to life and quite serious story, have the ability to transform that story or that person's story into art. And I thought to myself, yes, these women totally get it. This is what podcasting can be all about. An extension of your creative expression and art to be able to reach new audiences and build community around that creative spark. An invitation for others to come over and play with you. And so the culmination of all these different experiences and all these different influences, the reason why I'm sharing them all with you here is that it is inspiring me to play with structure, with format, with experiences that I'm creating, both in the Creative Impostor and in the Chicago Women's Creative Collective. And when we can get creative and get playful, self-promotion, that necessary evil on the to-do list when creativity is our business, suddenly becomes an invitation for you to come play with me. I don't know exactly what is coming yet, but it definitely has to do with creating more opportunities for us to explore, play, self-promote, self-express, using live interaction, using social media, using podcasting. And I'd like to invite you to come over to my house and find out what exactly it is I'm cooking up, both online and in Chicago. The best way to do that is to head over to thecreativeimpostor.com/magic right now through July 4th, 2017, you will get the How to Start Anything audio course for free, and you'll be on the list to find out what is coming up next. And I know that there's going to be some creative innovations in the Chicago Women's Creative Collective for fall locally. There's going to be some new online opportunities for our international audience to connect. And I'm going to be making some updates to my Patreon page. Patreon is a platform that I've been sharing on the podcast here, and it's sort of like an ongoing Kickstarter campaign to create sustainable funding for an artist's creative vision content community. And it's something that Bree mentioned in her interview last week that a lot of her clients and artists are using, and something that Jennifer Briney mentioned in her interview about Congressional Dish podcast, about how it is that she's able to work on Congressional Dish full time and also pay a team of people to work on the show and employ other people in that way to help support them in the work that they're doing. And so I have my Patreon up. I love the things that I've offered in creative there, but it hasn't quite gotten off the ground yet. So I will be making some adjustments there to see how I can play with that format a little bit more and make it more of a resource for you creatively. And all of those updates will come to you if you are on my VIP list. And you get on that list by heading over to thecreativeimpostor.com/magic. If you go to that URL after July 4th, the How to Start Anything course will no longer be there for free. That will be a paid purchase only, but there will be something else equally as exciting. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music, as always, is by Jovia Armstrong. I thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a week filled with opportunities to invite other people over to your creative space to play.